You know what the real challenge is starting a YouTube channel? It's not videotaping for content, and it's not finding ideas on how to make a video. It is editing and doing the voiceover for the dadgum video. I kid you not. Along with being the first time doing a YouTube video, this is my first time building a workbench. Truth be told, it's my first time building anything like this. As you can see, my garage is in desperate need of some organization and a workspace. I own a duplex with my wife, and we're remodeling both sides. And this is how I've done it: on the floor, on sawhorses, running chop saws and table saws. And I finally had it, and it needs to change. And today we're going to show you how to do it. Let me introduce you to the crew. That is my beautiful love of my life, 9.5 months. Yeah, not 9.5 months. 9 months and 1 week pregnant mom, and she is about to pop. And in the background, that is Creature, my 2.5-year-old daughter. She is just amazing and also the love of my life. The idea to start making this workbench came from a YouTube channel called Wranglerstar. Cody is the founder of that, and he built his son a heritage workbench, and we're going to follow along the steps that he did. First and foremost, you're going to take these boards and cut them down to 3 inches. You're going to take a 1/4 inch off on either side so that they're a nice, sharp rectangle. Then you have to make sure that each neighboring board, the grain has to be pointing or curving in the opposite direction. That way, as the table ages and dries over the years, it won't twist in one direction. It will pull against each other and stay how it was planed. Once I had all the boards the way I wanted them in the order, I did a final check and laid all these boards down. I don't know why I put it on cardboard. It was a noob mistake, but you can see that the last board on the far right is actually the worst board in the batch, and I use that board as my template for the entire project, which was a disaster. And here's my brand new set of power tools from Hitachi, last set that they had at Lowe's before they got bought out by Matobo. Confessions of an amateur, I do not know how to read a tape measure. I have tried over the years, and one thing that I really struggled with was trying to find out how to space my all threads through the length of the board. My wife actually figured it out. It eventually was, we went 3 inches in from either side, and I think it was 15 inches apart. I don't even know if that's mathematically symmetrical or even, but for the life of me, I just could not wrap my head around how to do it. So when you're doing it, I would say get the all thread as close to the edge so that you have the maximum amount of pressure holding those pieces together. And then we're actually going to use a 1 1/4 Forstner bit. I think this is a Diablo brand, but these things are awesome. They kind of are like a magical pencil sharpener. And you see what I'm doing here with the little screw, that I'm just making an indentation so that the Forstner bit can not move and skip around at that beginning portion of the initial drill. All these tips and tricks, I didn't come up with them on my own. I'm just regurgitating what Wranglerstar said on his channel. If anything, this is a prime example of what not to do and how to listen to him, because he's just so fantastic, and his knowledge is just so much more than mine. But when I was drilling my holes through the Forstner, what do you call it, inset or whatever, I didn't use a big enough drill bit. So had I used, what is my all thread? 5/16. If I use something, a half inch, maybe, that would have been a large enough hole to where all of the all threads would have moved through all 26 boards easier. I didn't do that, so I actually ended up having to re-drill these holes, I kid you not, 3 times. And finally on the 3rd time, I just burrowed it out and made it all ugly and everything. And then because that board on the right on these sawhorses was so warped, my holes didn't really line up, which made my planing job just an absolute terror. I could have fixed everything. I was doing a final check before I was gonna drill all these holes through these boards. And because I had all the Forstner holes on it, I just kept it. I kind of knew that it wasn't perfect, but all my problems would have been solved had I taken that one of those 2 boards that I just pulled out and replaced it. If you are having to clamp all your boards to drill all your holes, you are doing it wrong. The boards are too warped and you need to go back to Lowe's or Home Depot or whatever hardware lumber store and get straighter 2x4s. Getting my handy dandy workbench nice and level so that when we set the 2x4s on them, they'll dry evenly. Here's another mistake that I made. So I wanted my washer to fill the entire void of the Forstner bit. So I went ahead and got, 1 inch and a quarter washers, and I got 5/16 hole through the washer. Well, they were exactly 5/16, and my all thread is 5/16. So I had to burrow them out with a drill bit and then managed to get them on.
Come on.
I was unable to get the all threads through the first time, so we had to re-drill this again. This is the 2nd and 3rd time that I had to drill those holes out to make them large enough to where they would all fit. And then we used a gallon worth of Tight Bond to do this. Another thing, use paper and cardboard when you're cleaning up your mess or laying it down, because we used some plastic, and the plastic was a terrible idea. It's hard to sand, really made a mess, so use paper, cardboard products. And there it is. That was our first day working on this. We got done about midnight. Here's an amateur tip for you. When you're gluing it, obviously gravity will pull all the glue down, and that will fill every single crack and void on the tabletop. Use the bottom as your top, because the top will have some minor holes and gaps where there wasn't glue to fill every void. I thought a 40 grit belt sander would be able to plane this bench, but it was not beefy enough. I actually went through 4 belts to do 25% of the tabletop. So I sent my wife to Ace Hardware store, and she got a 37 belt. That one 37 grit belt managed to finish the entire tabletop on this side and the back side as well. And when you're working this hard, you gotta have a milkshake break. Make sure you always get your milkshake break in. Quick comment on the dust. It is absolutely terrible. It's totally unhealthy to breathe it in. So wear a mask, wear goggles, and close your freaking garage door, because mine is absolutely dust bombed. Should have closed it. So got up the next morning, trying to get this workbench done, and it is so heavy. It is literally 240 pounds, those 2x4s together. And right here, I shattered my dad's plastic workbench that he let me borrow. Well, don't put things on plastic workbenches that are a couple hundred pounds, because they'll break. So I was wondering how to get all this stuff off from the bottom, and my wife actually was doing some YouTube searching at night and found that there's a Japanese wood burning technique. And I was like, oh, I watched a little video on it and said, that I should be able to get all that off and make sanding easier. So there's 3 stages in which you can do this wood burning technique that I'm aware of. One, you can do a brief burn, which will give you this look, a very drastic zebra look. Second stage is where you burn it even into the growth rings between where the sap ran. And that's what I decided to do. I burned it a little darker. And then there's a third stage, which I did not do, to where you just charbroil the whole thing and to where the wood will bubble up and crisp. With my 37 grit belt on my sander, it managed to go through this like butter. The burn actually did a couple things. It was way easier to plane than the previous side because I could see all the highs and lows. Again, the dust is just unimaginable. And we whipped out a hacksaw blade and managed to flush any all thread that was sticking out the other side. I wouldn't recommend doing this, but we used 37, 80, and 220. Don't do that. Step a little bit more grits in there to get it more perfect and smooth. But we were just running out of time and we just needed to get this workbench done. Here's my rendition of that second stage Japanese wood burning. My dad recommended getting the workbench off the concrete, which was super smart because this oil will stain your driveway for the rest of forever. These are the Everbuilt 36-inch workbench legs that I got through Home Depot. They run about $60. Remember, those are just plain 2x4s, and they look fantastic with that Japanese burn and that Danish oil on there. Absolutely fantastic. Could not be happier the way it looks.
All right, show me your muscles, big time. Show me your teeth. So I ran into a little problem, not that big of a problem, but this right here is not beefy enough for any weight. In fact, when I push down on this edge, this flap right here bent. So what I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna take these guys and I'm gonna lay them on its side just like this. and set them from wheel to wheel, from here to there, and it'll raise the bench up a little bit, but I'm tall, I'm okay with that. And then that way this bench will be, the weight limit will be what the wheels are for.
So the weight limit for those Everbuilt legs, if you bolt them to the ground, are 6,000 pounds. If you put them on wheels, those wheels, I can't remember what brand they're called, but those are the 5 inchers and they are rated for 335 pounds per wheel. And the workbench itself, the way it all sets, probably is just around 300 pounds. So that kind of gives you an idea of how much weight this workbench will take. Because we're a young family and we're going to move in the future, I want to replace any screws with bolts, nuts, and washers so I can take apart the bench easier and put it back together. To get this bottom shelf flush with those 4x6s, I went ahead and notched them and just ran a skill saw through and then had a chisel to make it a little bit level. Worked out great, super easy, and I think is going to add some strength and resiliency to the workbench. And then my wife started going into pre-labor that night, so we knew that the little one was coming soon. We were about a 40-minute drive away from the hospital, so now I'm just in absolute overdrive to try to get this workbench done before this baby comes. So that night, my wife and I are laying in bed, and she's like, man, this is getting super intense. I think I'm in full-blown labor. And I was like, well, has your water broken? She's like, no. So she goes ahead and jumps in the shower, and she just says, ah, my water broke. Now we're like, oh my gosh. So my parents live about 20 minutes away from me. We dropped our daughter off at their house and went to the hospital at 3 o'clock in the morning, and 9:15 and 40 seconds, we had our beautiful brand new baby girl. And back to a workbench. So I wanted a removable shelf to where I could have 2 workstations. And this is it. The plywood did not like to be burned. The glues and everything inside of it, it just did not burn the same way as the 2x4s. But it managed to work out just fine. Just be super careful if you burn, finished plywood, that you don't just burn a hole through it or set it on fire. My in-laws came in to oogle and ogle over the brand new baby, and my father-in-law and I managed to put in this last shelf on the bottom. We went ahead and did this one permanently, really added a ton of rigidity to those steel legs and made those 5-inch wheels glide so much easier. I'm thinking on the far right hand side where it's overhung, I'm going to put a stool there, and I'm probably going to put my Dillon 550 reloading press on that end and just put all my case prep tools and screw them down to the top of the table on this side. And then on the other side, I don't know, I don't own a lot of power tools. That's actually my dad's chop saw, so I'm just going to leave it blank for now. So thank you, Wranglerstar, so much for inspiring me to do this. It was super fun, and it was a total labor of love. And there's my interpretation of Wranglerstar Heritage Workbench mobile style. Thank you to my entire family, little creature, and my beautiful baby-making wife. I love you guys. and we'll catch you on the next video.